In the Supreme Court today, hearing oral arguments over whether former President Trump is immune from criminal prosecution. This for his decisions while in office. An appeals court in Washington previously rejecting his immunity claim. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from the Supreme Court.
The 9 justices heard oral arguments on Thursday over whether former President Trump is immune from criminal prosecution for his actions in 2020. This case all boils down to special counsel Jack Smith of the DOJ, who charged Trump with interfering with the 2020 election results. Trump has pled not guilty and said that he was acting in his official capacity as president at the time. He said that presidential immunity is important because future presidents without this immunity would not act on anything out of fear of prosecution when they left office. Here are some highlights from the hearing.
The defendant asked the Arizona House Speaker to call the legislature into session to hold a hearing based on their claims of election fraud.
Absolutely an official act for the president to communicate with state officials on a matter of enormous federal interest and concern, attempting to defend the integrity of a federal election, to communicate with state officials and urge them to view what he views as their job under state law and federal law. That's an official act.
What petitioner is asking for is a broad blanket immunity that would protect the president, a former president, from any criminal exposure absent impeachment and conviction, which has never happened in our history.
The Supreme Court could send this case back to a district court for further consideration. They could also rule in Trump's favor or in the Justice Department's favor. If they rule in Trump's favor, then this entire prosecution goes away, and it could even impact his Georgia RICO case. If they rule in the Justice Department's favor, then this presidential immunity no longer applies to Trump, and he would be tried as a regular defendant. If reelected, Trump could order the Justice Department to drop the case. Now, justices are expected to rule on this case by the end of June, but it's unclear if the entire case will come to fruition by the November election. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Meanwhile, outside of the Supreme Court, protesters gathering behind the barricades. NTD's Sam Wang was in the crowd to find out what they had to say about former President Trump's immunity case.
And what are you here for today?
A lot of reasons. I like to bring peace. I get people singing and dancing together, except I'm being bombarded by this lady. But I do want to show support for Donald Trump. He's going to win this case. He's going to win all 4 cases.
And I see you got Jack Smith on your beanie right now. And tell us what that's about.
Yeah, Merrick Garland, the patriarchy, is responsible for this delay in this thing. So finally, after all that time, nearly 2 years, Jack Smith is the person responsible, and I'm all here for it.
So do you think the president should be immune from prosecution?
All presidents are. But there is a process called impeachment. They made 2 attempts. He was acquitted both times.
There should not be complete immunity. If it was, then we basically would be like Russia.
The man, his entire life, from when he was a 5-year-old, he was throwing rocks at a baby. He's evaded responsibility throughout his 77 years.
I see on your signs here, it says, on your sign, it says, "Coo, toxic loser." So what's that all about?
Coo, you know that colloquialism?
Now, if Trump won and he started attacking Biden, you watch them get how mad they'll get if the tables are turned. Trump won't do that.
It's obvious that the American people really do love Donald Trump, and that it'll be a landslide, as he puts it.
And to discuss the legal implications of former President Trump's immunity case, we're happy to have Professor William Jacobson. He's the director of the Securities Law Clinic at Cornell Law School. William Jacobson, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course, William, quite an historic day today. This morning, the U.S. Supreme Court hearing arguments regarding former President Trump's claim of immunity from prosecution. Trump's attorney argued that such immunity is crucial for a president to be able to act boldly and without fear of political retribution. What do you make of his arguments here? How will the court ultimately see this based on what you heard today in terms of the line of questioning and the attorney's responses?
Well, the argument was close to 2.5 hours, so the justices obviously are taking it very seriously, and it's hard to know how it's going to parse out, but people need to keep in mind the issue here, the legal issue which the court took, is whether the president has immunity for official acts. There's no dispute that purely private acts do not have presidential immunity. And I think that was the issue. And there was a lot of discussion during this 2.5 hours as to how you draw that distinction and what happens when you have a mix of official and unofficial, or official and private acts going on. And that's what I think is going to be the really tough part for the court to sort out here.
William, with regard to a statute interpretation dispute, could you give us an idea of the exchange between Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and Trump's attorney Sauer regarding the, I guess, quote, clear statement requirement in the statute, which Sauer is said to have forfeited by not stating it initially?
Well, right. The argument from the justice was that this was not raised below, and therefore you can't raise issues for the first time in the Supreme Court. That's not the nature of the court. And so I don't know what the record is, whether it's clear enough. And the issue there, the legal issue, is whether a generalized criminal statute, one which does not expressly purport to apply to the president, can be a basis for prosecuting a president. And again, that was another issue that came up. It was raised by Justice Jackson, and I don't know whether it will enter into the court's view at all on this. I think the court's going to rule on the immunity issue and leave everything else for the lower courts to sort out.
To your previous point, much of the debate centered on differentiating between official and private acts in the charges against Trump. His attorney argued that official acts should be removed from the indictment. How would this distinction ultimately impact the case's prosecution?
Well, it depends how far it goes. Again, you get into this murky area where someone may have partial official, partial private, and the Trump team wants the official act immunity to be fairly expansive. Really, anything touching on official acts, anything within the orbit of official acts. So I think it would gut much of the prosecution case. I don't know how much would be left, because really it was things that he did while he was president that are the alleged basis for the crimes.
Lastly, special counsel appointment regarding Jack Smith. Justice Clarence Thomas questioned the appointment of special prosecutor Jack Smith, noting that he was not appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Is such an appointment necessary, and does this suggest a potential basis for an appeal?
Well, that's an issue that's coming up in the Florida case, particularly, and can be raised. I don't think the Supreme Court has it in front of it right now on this matter of immunity, but that may be a signal that there's at least one justice on that court who wants somebody to come to the court to question the appointment. And that the argument is that this is an unlawful appointment of the special prosecutor and so special counsel. And so it's not in front of the court. I can't imagine they're going to rule on it, but it's clearly on the mind of Clarence Thomas.
William Jacobson, as always, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.